Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that the most valuable thing you own, your mind, has been quietly rented out, piece by piece, to strangers you've never met, for purposes you don't understand, and in ways you didn't agree to. When you start to think about it, attention is the most valuable thing you have. It's not money, it's not even time, because you can have a lot of time and still waste it completely if you can't direct your mind towards something meaningful. Attention is the act of noticing, of selecting what in the vast chaos of the world you will orient yourself toward. And it's finite, radically finite. You can't attend to everything. At any given moment, you are filtering out almost everything you could see, hear, or think about in order to focus on one small portion of reality. That's how you build understanding. That's how you construct skill. That's how you become a person who can actually act with competence in the world. But because it's so limited, attention is incredibly vulnerable to theft. And make no mistake, in the modern digital landscape, there are entire industries dedicated to taking it from you, not by accident, but with precision. Your ancestors had their attention shaped by their immediate environment, the physical space they occupied, the people they knew personally, the challenges they could physically see and touch. Attention was largely governed by necessity. You focused on the field because the crops wouldn't grow themselves. You paid attention to the fire because letting it go out could mean freezing to death in the winter. Even leisure, telling stories, carving wood, singing was localized and engaged the senses in a grounded way. Now that world is gone, you're in a constant flood of competing demands, most of them utterly disconnected from your immediate reality, and all of them engineered to be as irresistible as possible. Think about what's happening when you open your phone. You're not choosing freely among neutral options. You're stepping into a system built to learn exactly what kind of stimulus will keep you there, scrolling, clicking, watching indefinitely. It's not some random accident that you can just check something and then find yourself 45 minutes later having forgotten what you even meant to do. That's the business model. They sell your attention, literally package and trade it, because if they can hold it, they can influence what you think about, how you feel, and even what you'll do next. And once you understand that, you start to realize how precarious your mental independence actually is. The cost of losing control over your attention isn't just distraction in the moment. It's the erosion of the very capacity to focus at all. The brain works like a muscle. Train it to stay with a single complex idea, and it gets stronger at doing that. Train it instead to dart endlessly from one novelty to another, and it becomes restless, unable to tolerate stillness or sustained effort. That's when the deep work, the real thinking, the hard problem, solving the things that create value and give your life coherence, start to slip out of reach. And because attention shapes your perceptions, and your perceptions shape your reality, when someone else controls your attention, they are, in a very real sense, constructing your reality for you. In the past, the boundaries of your attention were set by the physical world you inhabited. The number of people you could interact with, the stories you could hear, the events you could witness, all of it was naturally limited by geography, time, and circumstance. If something important happened, it was because it was close to you, or because someone you trusted brought it to your attention. There was a kind of protective filter in that arrangement, a natural barrier against being overwhelmed. You could only process so much because only so much could actually reach you. But the internet has obliterated those boundaries. Now, in the space of a single morning, you can witness a natural disaster on one side of the planet, a political scandal on another, a celebrity meltdown, 1,000 strangers arguing in real time, and an endless supply of curated images designed to evoke envy, outrage, or desire. You can live your entire day reacting to things that have no tangible connection to your actual life, and yet they dominate your mental landscape as if they were happening in your own home. This removal of natural limits creates a profound problem for the human mind. Our nervous systems evolved to deal with a certain pace and scope of information, mostly local, mostly gradual. We are not wired to take in hundreds of emotionally charged events in rapid succession, day after day, without any real opportunity to act on most of them. The result is a constant state of low-level agitation, a feeling that there's always something urgent demanding our response, even when there isn't. That sense of urgency is addictive because it feels like you're engaged with the world, but it's an illusion. You're engaged with a representation of the world, crafted and filtered through platforms whose only goal is to keep you engaged. When attention has no boundaries, it becomes scattered. You're pulled in 10 directions at once, each one competing for emotional primacy. You start your morning reading about an earthquake, but before you can process that, you're reading a thread about a controversial law, then watching a clip of an animal doing something funny, then seeing a headline about the economy, then stumbling into an argument about a film you haven't even seen. This is not just variety, it's fragmentation, and fragmentation prevents depth. You can't think deeply about anything if you're being pulled away every 30 seconds by something new. The internet thrives on this because the more often your attention shifts, the more opportunities there are to serve you another ad, to collect more data, to keep you inside the loop. There's no stopping point built into the system. In the physical world, conversations end, events conclude, and night eventually falls. Online, there is no nightfall, the feed never ends, the notifications never stop, and the information fire hose never turns off. And because there's no natural end point, the responsibility for creating one falls entirely on you, which is something most people never consciously learned how to do. The systems that govern what you see online are not passive mirrors of the world. They are active curators, shaping your perception according to criteria that have nothing to do with truth, balance, or your personal growth. At the core of these systems are algorithms, complex sets of instructions designed to predict what will keep you engaged the longest. And these algorithms have discovered, through relentless experimentation on billions of users, that the fastest way to hold attention is not by presenting the most accurate information or the most nuanced arguments, but by delivering content that provokes immediate, intense emotional responses. Outrage, fear, and moral indignation consistently outperform calm, balanced reasoning because they demand instant engagement. You see something that shocks or offends you, and you can't resist reacting, commenting, sharing, or seeking more of the same. The platform registers your reaction and concludes that this is what you want, so it serves you more, tightening the loop over time. This loop reshapes your mental habits. You scanning for content that confirms your sense of outrage or validates your suspicions, because those are the things that give you the sharpest jolt of emotional energy. The subtler, slower forms of understanding, careful analysis, patient reading, genuine dialogue, begin to feel dull by comparison. The dopamine hit from a piece of provocative content is immediate, and your brain learns to seek it out just like it would learn to seek sugar or nicotine. But unlike those substances, the supply of emotionally charged content online is inexhaustible, and the delivery system adapts to you personally. Every click, every pause, every bit of scrolling data is a signal telling the system how to keep you hooked. This prioritization of impulsivity over reflection has consequences that go far beyond the individual. In a healthy intellectual environment, ideas compete on the basis of their merit, their capacity to explain reality, and their ability to withstand scrutiny. In the environment shaped by attention-driven algorithms, Ideas compete on the basis of how quickly they can trigger an emotional spike. Complex issues are reduced to simplistic narratives, not because that's how the world works, but because that's what performs well in the system. And once a certain kind of content proves effective, it gets amplified, drowning out other perspectives. The psychological toll of this is subtle but cumulative. If you spend enough time in an environment where speed and intensity are rewarded over depth and accuracy, you begin to internalize those values. You expect information to come in bite-sized, emotionally potent packages. You lose patience for ambiguity, for slow, careful argumentation, for anything that doesn't resolve into a clear hero and villain within seconds. And because the algorithms thrive on polarization, they will gently nudge you toward the most extreme, most emotionally charged corners of whatever topic you engage with. Without realizing it, you end up in a feedback loop where your impulsive reactions shape the content you see, and the content you see shapes your impulsive reactions, narrowing your intellectual world while making it feel more urgent and more complete than it actually is. Who you are is not some static, isolated essence hidden inside you. It is in large part the product of what you consistently pay attention to. The human mind is a sculptor, and attention is the chisel. Every thought you dwell on, every image you absorb, every conversation you engage with, slowly shapes the patterns of your thinking, your emotional responses, and your sense of what matters. Over time, those patterns become your identity, the framework you use to interpret the world and to act within it. When your attention is steady and directed toward meaningful goals, your identity becomes integrated and coherent. You build a sense of self that is rooted in a consistent set of values, memories, and aspirations. But when your attention is constantly fragmented, that coherence begins to disintegrate. The internet, with its endless stream of shifting stimuli, pulls your mind in multiple directions at once. You might spend 10 minutes immersed in a tragic news story, then instantly pivot to a comedy clip, then skim an article about a new technology, then scroll through photos of someone's vacation, all without pausing to process any of it. Each of these fragments occupies a moment of your awareness, but none of them lingers long enough to connect to the others in a meaningful way. The result is a mind that is perpetually in motion but rarely moving forward. You're always reacting, never fully engaging. And because you're reacting to such a wide range of disconnected inputs, the self that emerges from this process is less stable, less grounded, and more susceptible to external influence. Identity requires narrative, a coherent story about where you've been, who you are, and where you're going. That story is constructed from the things you focus on long enough to integrate them into your world, But if your attention is continually hijacked by novelty, you never finish writing that story. You get fragments instead of chapters, headlines instead of books, impressions instead of understanding. Over time, this leaves you vulnerable to adopting whatever identity is most convenient in the moment, because you haven't had the stillness and consistency to develop one deliberately. This is part of why so many people feel unmoored, like they are drifting without a clear sense of who they are or what they want. The danger is amplified by the fact that the same platforms that fragment your attention are also designed to feed you curated versions of yourself. They reflect back to you the topics you've clicked on, the emotions you've expressed, the patterns you've shown, creating a digital mirror that reinforces certain aspects of your personality while ignoring others. You can start to mistake this distorted reflection for your true self, allowing an algorithm, not your conscious intention, to define what you care about, what you believe, and even how you see your place in the world. And the more your attention is fractured, the easier it becomes for that external system to fill in the gaps in your identity with whatever serves its own goals rather than yours. Deep thinking is not something that happens by accident. It requires space, focus, and an unbroken chain of mental effort that allows you to hold an idea in your mind long enough to examine it from different angles, test its assumptions, and connect it to other pieces of knowledge you've gathered over time. This is how insight emerges, how creative solutions are born, how you transform scattered bits of information into understanding. But deep thinking is incompatible with the kind of fractured, reactive mental environment that the internet fosters. When your phone vibrates, when a new headline flashes across your feed, when a notification appears in the corner of your screen, your attention splinters. You may return to what you were doing, but the thread of your thought has already been interrupted. And if this happens repeatedly dozens, even hundreds of times a day, your ability to sustain deep concentration begins to erode. The shift is gradual at first. You notice it when you try to read a book and find your eyes skimming instead of absorbing the sentences. You notice it when you sit down to solve a complex problem but feel an almost physical itch to check your messages or refresh your feed. This is not just a matter of willpower. It is a matter of conditioning. Your brain adapts to the environment you place it in. If that environment rewards quick, shallow engagement over sustained attention, your mind becomes optimized for that pattern. And once that happens, the patience required for deep work begins to feel unnatural, even uncomfortable. Without deep thinking, you end up living in the surface layer of your own mind. You respond to whatever is most immediate, but you don't give yourself the time to understand why you are responding the way you are, or whether your response aligns with your values and long-term goals. Shallow, reactive habits create the illusion of productivity because you are constantly doing something, clicking, reading, replying, but little of it builds toward anything lasting. The more you live in this reactive state, the less you notice what you're losing, because you become accustomed to a mind that is constantly in motion without ever settling. Over time, the cost is not just the loss of deep work, but the loss of deep self-knowledge. Reflection requires the same kind of sustained attention as problem-solving or creative work. It means holding your own thoughts still long enough to examine them, to see patterns, to notice what's driving you beneath the surface. If you are always jumping from one stimulus to the next, you never give yourself the opportunity to confront your deeper motivations or to make deliberate choices about how you want to live. Instead, your mental life becomes a series of quick, disconnected reactions to whatever crosses your path, leaving you vulnerable to manipulation by forces that are very skilled at deciding what you see next. And in turn, how you think and act. The internet offers the promise of connection on a scale that no previous generation could have imagined. You can send a message to someone halfway across the world in seconds, see the daily lives of friends and strangers alike, and participate in communities built around any interest or cause you can think of. On the surface, this appears to be an extraordinary advancement in human interaction. But beneath that promise lies a reality that often delivers the opposite, not deepened connection, but a hollow sense of being surrounded while remaining fundamentally alone. The interactions that take place online tend to be brief, fragmented, and curated, stripped of many of the subtle signals and emotional richness that face-to-face communication provides. You might exchange hundreds of messages in a day, but they rarely carry the weight or intimacy of a single meaningful conversation in person. This dynamic creates a paradox. You feel as though you are socially engaged because you are constantly communicating, yet that communication lacks the depth required to foster genuine emotional closeness. Real connection is built through shared experiences, vulnerability, and the slow accumulation of trust over time. Online, these elements are harder to sustain. Messages can be ignored or misinterpreted, tone can be flattened or lost entirely, and the ever-present distractions of the digital environment make it difficult to give anyone your full attention. For long, even when interactions feel pleasant, they are often competing with dozens of other simultaneous exchanges, each one preventing you from immersing fully in the moment. There is also the problem of substitution, the tendency to replace in-person relationships with digital ones. For someone feeling lonely or isolated, the immediate accessibility of online communication can seem like a solution, but over-reliance on it can make the underlying loneliness worse. When much of your social life takes place in a context where you can control how you present yourself, hide your flaws, and disengage the moment discomfort arises, you miss out on the messy, sometimes difficult, but ultimately necessary aspects of real human connection. Without those challenges, relationships remain shallow and fragile, easily disrupted or discarded. The curated nature of online interactions can also intensify feelings of disconnection. You are constantly confronted with highlight reels of other people's lives, which can create the illusion that everyone else is more connected, more fulfilled, and more socially active than you are. This perception can make you withdraw further, deepening your sense of isolation. Instead of using the internet to strengthen bonds with the people physically near you, you may end up in a cycle where digital contact feels easier and safer, even as it leaves you feeling emptier. Over time, this shift erodes the social skills that in-person interaction requires. The ability to read subtle cues, to navigate awkward silences, to respond with empathy in real time, all of these are sharpened through direct human contact, and all of them can dull when your primary mode of communication is mediated by a screen. The result is a network of connections that looks large from the outside but feels thin and fragile from within, leaving you with the persistent feeling that something essential is missing from your relationships. Human beings are not built to exist in a constant state of stimulation. The brain has natural rhythms, moments of alert engagement followed by moments of rest and quiet, that allow it to process experiences, consolidate memories, and prepare for the next challenge. In a healthy environment, those rhythms emerge naturally. You might have a conversation, then walk home in silence. You might finish a task, then sit and watch the wind move through the trees. You might end the day with nothing to do but think. These intervals of stillness are not wasted time. They are essential for integrating what you've learned and maintaining mental balance. But the modern internet disrupts this natural cycle by providing a constant, uninterrupted flow of stimulation. Whenever a gap appears in your day, there is a device ready to fill it with new images, videos, messages, and headlines, each one tugging at your attention. This constant input trains your brain to expect novelty at all times. The moment there is a pause, the absence of stimulation feels uncomfortable, almost like a small withdrawal. You reach for your phone without thinking, scrolling through feeds or opening apps, not necessarily because you have something specific to check, but because the quiet feels unnatural. Over time, this pattern rewires your reward system. Instead of deriving satisfaction from sustained effort or delayed gratification, you become conditioned to seek the quick hit of dopamine that comes from a new notification or a surprising piece of content. The brain begins to associate any moment of stillness with boredom, and boredom becomes something to be avoided at all costs. The danger in this is that boredom is not an enemy. It is a signal from your mind that there is space for reflection, for creativity, for self-directed thought. Many breakthroughs, insights, and creative ideas emerge precisely in those unstructured moments, when the mind is free to wander without being constantly interrupted. When you fill every gap with stimulation, you deny yourself the chance to make these deeper connections. Instead, your thinking becomes fragmented, reactive, and dependent on whatever external input comes next. There is also a cost to emotional regulation. Without periods of quiet, your nervous system never fully resets. Continuous stimulation keeps you in a heightened state of arousal, which can make you more anxious, more impatient, and more prone to overreaction. Small inconveniences feel bigger, disagreements escalate faster, and your ability to respond calmly diminishes. Your baseline for what feels normal shifts upward, so that peace and silence feel alien rather than restorative. This shift in baseline has cultural implications as well. When large groups of people lose the capacity to tolerate stillness, entire conversations, debates, and public discussions become shorter, sharper, and more emotionally charged. Complex issues get reduced to quick sound bites because neither the speaker nor the audience has the patience for more. The very skills that allow for thoughtful decision-making and nuanced understanding are slowly replaced by habits of constant reaction, making it harder for individuals and communities to think deeply about the challenges they face. Boredom has long been misunderstood as a state to be avoided, a kind of emptiness that needs to be filled with something, anything, to make it go away. But boredom is actually one of the most fertile mental states a person can experience. It is in moments of boredom that the mind, unoccupied by urgent tasks or constant distractions, begins to roam freely. This mental wandering is not aimless. It is the brain's way of exploring possibilities, connecting ideas that at first seem unrelated, and generating new patterns of thought. Many of the world's most creative breakthroughs have been born in periods of stillness, when there was nothing to do but think. Without boredom, the mental processes that lead to insight, invention, and self-discovery are often stifled before they can begin. The problem is that the modern digital environment has all but eradicated boredom. A few decades ago, boredom was an unavoidable part of life. You waited in line, you sat on a bus, you stared out the window during a long afternoon with nothing scheduled. In those moments, your mind learned how to entertain itself, how to observe, how to imagine. Now every spare second can be filled instantly with stimulation. A pocket-sized device can deliver an endless supply of news, games, videos, and conversations, all designed to grab your attention and hold it. The result is that boredom rarely has a chance to settle in, and with it, the opportunities for spontaneous creativity are diminished. When boredom is absent, the brain grows accustomed to having its focus directed from the outside rather than generated from within. Instead of actively engaging with your thoughts, you become a passive consumer of whatever information or entertainment is most readily available. Over time, this erodes the capacity for self-directed creativity. It becomes harder to start projects without external prompts, harder to sustain focus on something that doesn't immediately deliver a reward, harder to sit with uncertainty long enough for new ideas to emerge. In this way, the constant avoidance of boredom can lead to a subtle form of mental dependence, where you rely on outside input to stimulate thought instead of cultivating it from within. Boredom also plays a critical role in emotional processing. When the mind is free from constant distraction, it naturally begins to sift through unresolved feelings and experiences, making sense of them and integrating them into your personal narrative. This can be uncomfortable because it often brings to the surface emotions or memories you might prefer to avoid. But working through those moments is part of maintaining psychological health. When you fill every quiet moment with noise, you interrupt this process, leaving emotions unexamined and unresolved. The cost is cumulative, and over time it can leave you feeling restless, disconnected, and strangely dissatisfied, even in the midst of constant activity. The irony is that the very state people now go to great lengths to avoid is also one of the most important for their mental and creative well-being. Boredom is not the absence of meaning. It is the space in which meaning can be discovered, if only you allow yourself to remain in it long enough for your mind to do the work it was designed to do. The ability to preserve mental clarity and focus in the modern digital environment is not something that will happen naturally. The forces competing for your attention are too powerful, too well resourced, and too deeply embedded into the fabric of daily life for you to simply drift through and expect to emerge unaffected. Protecting your mind requires deliberate, conscious effort. It requires recognizing that your attention is the foundation upon which everything else in your life is built. Your relationships, your work, your sense of meaning, and treating it with the seriousness it deserves. Without this recognition, it is all too easy to fall into patterns of passive consumption, where your focus is constantly being directed by algorithms, notifications, and the agendas of others, rather than by your own considered priorities. The first step in self-discipline is awareness. You cannot protect what you do not notice is being taken from you. This means paying close attention to how you spend your time and how you feel afterward. Do you emerge from an hour online feeling informed, inspired, and ready to act? Or do you feel scattered, anxious, and strangely unsatisfied? That difference matters. It is the signal that tells you whether your attention is being invested or squandered. But awareness alone is not enough. You must also be willing to set boundaries that counteract the design of the platforms that seek to keep you engaged indefinitely. This may mean scheduling specific times for checking messages or news, turning off non-essential notifications, or creating spaces in your day that are intentionally free from digital input. These boundaries can feel uncomfortable at first because they run against the grain of modern life. You might experience moments of unease or even anxiety when you step away from constant connectivity. This is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that you are breaking a habit of dependency. With practice, those feelings are replaced by a growing sense of freedom, the ability to choose what you will give your attention to, rather than having that choice made for you. Self-discipline, in this sense, is not about restriction for its own sake, but about reclaiming the mental resources you need to think deeply, act intentionally, and live meaningfully. Another dimension of protecting your mind is curating the inputs you allow into it. Not all content is created equal, and not all voices deserve equal weight in shaping your worldview. By consciously selecting sources that encourage depth, nuance, and integrity, you strengthen your mental environment in the same way a healthy diet strengthens your body. This is not about avoiding challenge or disagreement. It is about avoiding the mental junk food that leaves you overstimulated but undernourished. Over time, these practices form a kind of mental armor. They do not isolate you from the world, but they allow you to engage with it on your own terms, grounded in clarity rather than swept away by the constant churn of distractions and manufactured urgency that defines so much of online life. If you do not take an active role in directing your attention and managing your mental environment, the path of least resistance will lead you into a life where you are more of an observer than a participant. The endless streams of digital content are designed to pull you along effortlessly, requiring no initiative, no planning, and no commitment. You can spend hours watching, scrolling, and clicking without making a single conscious choice about what you are engaging with or why. This passivity feels easy in the moment, but over time it shapes the way you live. Days blend together because you are not anchored in purposeful action. You are simply reacting to whatever appears next on your screen. The narrative of your life becomes less something you are writing and more something you are consuming, as if you were watching it unfold from the outside. This passive existence is dangerous because it erodes the sense of agency that gives life meaning. Human beings are wired to seek goals, solve problems, and shape their environment in ways that reflect their values and aspirations. When those capacities are left unused, they atrophy. The more you rely on external inputs to determine what you think about, talk about, and care about, the less you practice the skills of self-direction and intentional living. You become more susceptible to subtle manipulation, because the mental pathways you follow are not ones you have chosen, but ones that have been laid out for you by systems that profit from your engagement, regardless of its impact on your well-being. The danger is compounded by the fact that these systems are engineered to feel rewarding in the short term. They give you constant hits of novelty, small bursts of amusement or outrage, and the illusion of being informed or socially connected. But these rewards are shallow and fleeting, leaving little of lasting value. Without conscious intervention, you may find yourself chasing them out of habit, mistaking activity for progress and stimulation for fulfillment. The deeper forms of satisfaction, the kind that come from mastering a skill, contributing to something larger than yourself, or living in alignment with your principles, require sustained effort and focus, qualities that are hard to cultivate when your attention is constantly being pulled elsewhere. Breaking out of this passive cycle demands intentional choices. It means deciding in advance what matters to you and allocating your time and attention accordingly. It means being willing to miss out on much of the noise in order to be present for what is truly important. It means trading the comfort of constant distraction for the challenge of purposeful action. This is not about rejecting technology or withdrawing from the modern world. It is about refusing to let those forces dictate the structure of your life. The goal is not to eliminate ease and entertainment, but to ensure they serve as complements to a life you are actively shaping, rather than the foundation upon which it rests. If we don't reclaim our attention, we risk surrendering not just our focus, but the very authorship of our lives. The choice is simple: let the noise write your story, or take back the pen and write it yourself.